Hey, Ken, welcome to the Ultimate QA podcast. Such a pleasure to have you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, first, thank you for having me. This is a pleasure to be on the podcast. Yeah, my name is Ken Simeon. I'm the director of quality assurance at a company called RippleMatch. RippleMatch is a small company where we basically tailor job recruiting for companies that are looking to hire entry-level employees. Easiest way to put it. So we're mostly targeting those that are graduating college and or looking for internships in order to match them with companies that are really looking to fill those types of roles.
Okay, cool. And from what I saw about you guys' platform, you guys are integrating some kind of AI features into that platform,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. We have a few AI features integrated into our platform. Like many companies that consume data from those that are looking for jobs, we process resumes and we want to take that resume that a job seeker is looking to provide to an eventual recruiter and give it structured data. So AI definitely helps in that space. It's, and I would say it was a game changer when AI and that became available compared to some other product marketing pieces that were, I'll say other pieces of software that were in the market that did resume or document processing. It definitely changed the scope of our ability and what we can do with data.
Nice. So you guys are using it for data transformation?
Yeah. And in that respect, data transformation and also using it as those that are on the platform, once if they're like set up with an account, they'll see interactions with AI. We use the data that we push through AI models in order for us to take the data of the job seeker, your experience, internships, whatever, and we look at the job descriptions that they are potentially compatible for. And we give individuals a summary of the compatibility that we see from their experience to the job itself in order to assure them that this job that we are providing them really matches up with what type of role that they're looking for, their experiences, and those things in order to really kind of give a stronger understanding of, hey, this is why we are suggesting this role in this company to you.
That's very cool. Yeah, I haven't seen that kind of feature before. I'm curious, Dan, how well does that like correlate? Like if you guys say, hey, you're very well qualified for the job, how well does that correlate with the person being hired?
Well, it's directly tied to the information that they provided from their resume and when they go through and curate their profile. So if they've gone through and verified that, yes, we actually took their resume, produced job experiences, or created other information off of a really simple profile that we generate. We look at that and their experiences and information and from the description of the company and the role. And we have specific target points within inside this set of data that we match up with. And the other side of it is we are looking for people that are getting into their careers. So no, they don't necessarily have a lot of experience, but nowadays young computer science, undergrads have classes or projects that they've done. A lot of them have done their own, side projects. So they built up their own level of experience, and that can get tied into like an internship or maybe a entry level software engineering role, or sometimes even a QA role. We've seen those on our platform also.
Nice. Okay, cool. Ken, with today's world and everything that's going on, I feel like there's so much going on.
Yeah,
First of all, the economy is just seems to be rough all over the world. There's a lot of very weird stuff going on there.
sure.
Then we got AI
Yep.
shaking everything up, changing industries left and right. People are so uncertain about what the future looks like. What is my role going to look like?
Mhm.
What's the future of my company? Will my company be eliminated by an AI tool tomorrow? Like so many crazy questions. What
Yeah.
kind of challenges are you all facing today?
Probably the most challenge is I would say AI has allowed companies and individuals to start little companies that, compete in some level in some way. That's probably the most things that we see. Other side of that is as a software engineering organization, we see the tooling that everybody is creating. And so that is to your point, it is shifting how job markets are really kind of shaking out in that respect, where what are the skills potentially that somebody is looking for to hire an individual. And yes, there are companies that are looking for a little bit deeper understanding and skills in the space of have you used AI platforms? Do you understand machine learning? Because ideally, if you're in college now, not necessarily graduating, but maybe soon, you did have some large language model, but not necessarily AI, but machine learning. So machine learning is potentially classes that I've taken, which translates into AI as we know it today. But really, how does that tie back into different pieces? Yes, there is a lot of scariness around what will take over jobs. I definitely have a personal opinion that AI is more of a tool set and not necessarily a replacement. And if it is a replacement, it's going to ideally be on minimal tasks that, yes, maybe you hired somebody to do these minimal digital tasks at one point. Ideally, you can take that person, train them to do something else in order to support the task that they were doing before. And I think companies hopefully have learned over the years of trying to replace, say, those in quality assurance with more automated testing, that at some point you hit a level of depreciation where you still need the people with the understanding of your products, platforms, and customers in order to produce high quality software or complete certain tasks. And I think AI is going to come in there and with agentic applications and stuff in order to streamline pipelines, aid in production deliverability. And I don't necessarily see full jobs being replaced. I see jobs adjusting and changing.
Do you feel like, because sometimes I feel like for maybe junior level people, it's almost like the barrier to entry has become larger, because if we're talking about like AI doing some of these lower level tasks, which maybe in the past junior level engineers might have done, I don't know, come in and I don't know, maybe start writing some automated tests, or maybe setting up a CI/CD pipeline, doing some basic stuff that now AI can do.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like they need to be able to be at a higher level in order to surpass the AI and in order to be valuable on top of what AI already provides. Do you see something like that?
I guess I don't see it happening right away. I do see companies attempting and trying to use AI to replace that individual or maybe a sets of individuals. But really, what happens? That's going to fall on somebody else's shoulders with inside the company. And so some other software developer, if the company is like, okay, we need more software developers, but instead we're going to pay for licensing for Claude Code in order to enable this individual or maybe somebody to prototype things, actually fix bugs or anything like that, that person has to take on more responsibilities. And so that's where the situation of you might hit your diminishing returns. So you want more output from the individuals that you have hired. So you're buying tools for them, which is common. But does that really replace the individual humans that actually need to be driving the tools? Because, as a person that has hired many people over the years, you start adding responsibilities on people and more deliverability on people. Sometimes that moves into a negative direction. And so that's where you have to really balance the desire for using tools like AI in order to not hire somebody, and from the other side of hiring somebody and training them up. And so leadership has to have that balance of what they want to bring into their company in order to, one, either you're aiding your engineers on the software development side or the quality engineering side in order to make them more efficient, but to make them 2x of their deliverability or 3x, whatever it is. Yeah, you might get more pull requests out there, but is it the level of code quality that you really want to put out to the customers? And so, I would think leaders have to balance that of what they do. Because our experience with our company, we use a combination, Copilot, provided by GitHub. Some you're using Claude Code. Others, like myself, I've experimented in Obama running LLMs locally and interacting with things. Some things work well, some things don't, and you have to have the people there to curate what is finally going to go out. And I think that's where it really comes in. And so when it rolls back to talking about entry level roles, say somebody that has a CS degree coming out, having experience of working on projects is great. I think if they have taken the time to start understanding the new tooling around Copilot, Claude Code, or whatever it is, I think that's good. But the thing is, your basic knowledge will show or not as you have conversations with actual humans. And so I think understanding how platforms work, how the particular programming language works is still going to be key. And then understanding how to use the tools. December 2023, everybody was Google searching. They were deep in Stack Overflow, or they were YouTube death
Stack
scrolling.
Overflow. What is
I
that?
know.
What
Well,
is Stack Overflow? Is that like a CD-ROM?
well, maybe they could put it on CD-ROMs these days, but you know what I mean. So before the large language models became accessible and people started building tooling around them for other people to use, they had to go consume on their own and take those learnings and move them forward. That's really what I'm saying. If people are doing that and they're taking their learnings and applying them, they will ultimately not fully be replaced by some other entity, a tool. A tool is not going to replace them. At least that's what I believe.
You brought up many interesting points I want to touch on. One of them is, so you mentioned you guys are using stuff like Claude Code, GitHub Copilot, experience with Olama. How are you guys, I guess, using that in your organization? Because I know many organizations, and maybe it's usually the larger ones, are concerned about AI usage because they don't know where their data is going to go and how it's stored and so on. What is your guys' thought on like data security and privacy of using these LLMs?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. Let's put it that way. One, we leverage LLMs for our products. We're using those in order to, as we said, process data and provide experiences. We're using it, and so we've reviewed the licensing and everything that goes along with that, and made sure things are set up with those products in order to not leverage the data that we're providing them for their learning and modeling. So I think that's one side of it. The other side of it is we've gone through and done our own internal training. So the key thing that we've done in order to make our development environment safer is that, all of our developers, and if you're a tester also, or quality engineer, you need some sort of data of your platform. We've gone through and we've made sure that anything that a developer is using as a subset of production that has been anonymized and is anonymized. So there's no real people in our test databases in that respect. Out of that, if we worry about leakage of other people's PII, is not going to happen. And then the other side of it is the small amounts of most of these platforms, except for Claude Code, they're only reading the active pages that you have. They're getting better about having further depth of context, but that's not really going to give away anything truly. And the other side of it is, ultimately it's good practices. So like for our CI/CD pipelines and everything like that, all of our keys, we use a combination of things. That all of our keys that are stored in configuration files are already hashed.
Oh, really? Not in your pull requests?
No. So they're not sitting there wide open. So most of the tooling, you can't unhash them without a lot of other context that is separated out. I think it comes down to having really good software development practices before you have the implementation of these toolings, and building that first in your pipeline of delivering a software quality is probably key around building your development life cycles, producing or putting together how you build software and deliver it, and making sure the human interactions are working well there. And then you can add in additional tooling.
Yeah, that makes sense. One question that I skipped over, Ken, is, so tell us, I guess, your role right now in your organization. And I know you manage a team. So what does your team look like?
Okay.
And how are you all operating to, deliver higher quality software?
Yeah, absolutely. So a bit of a journey, if you don't mind me. I'll try to make it short and sweet.
We got time, my friend. This is what we're here for.
Awesome. So I joined RippleMatch about 4 years ago. 2020 to 21, somewhere right in there. And at that time, I was brought on to build out the QA organizations. RippleMatch at that time was on a big, massive growth. So we are hiring software engineers. I came in to hire quality engineers and quality and manual testers, covering both spaces. Along with that is, you have to rework what it means to deliver software. And so with that, you're growing people, and so you have to build processes and procedures. So all of that came around, hired on multiple contractors, multiple individuals themselves, our regular full headcount. And the other side of it is we're a fully remote company, so we're spread across, based in New York, spread across the United States. So we built our organization, had multiple dev teams and sprint teams themselves and everything like that. As you mentioned earlier, economics of the world has made a lot of companies adjust and change post pandemic and everything like that. So in that respect, we've made some changes. So now we are down to a much smaller team. We are down to a team of 5 engineers, myself as the lead quality person. I have 1 contractor. So in that we have just one, if you want to say, Kanban team with our product managers. And so our working style is very much in that Kanban agile methodology, where we've put in a lot of upfront processes in order to make sure that, one, the input is going to be as good as the output. And meaning product managers have an understanding of what the software developers need and the deliverables to them in order for them to build the software. QA is involved in all those conversations on product development and product ideation. we are extra communicated. We communicate a ton. That's probably the easiest way to put it. So Slack is our best friends, and we make sure that projects have their own project channels and the conversations are about those projects. And so any questions answered. So small team, lots of communication is a key thing. And then we've built process pipelines across the way for, making sure that our CI/CD processes are handling, doing all the linting, running all of our, back-end UI and unit tests and front-end component tests and things of that nature all the time. Set up various iterations of being able to test within integration environments, easy deploys where we deploy to production in less than like 5 minutes. And that's all based on top of Kubernetes and everything of that nature. So all that long story said, my role in a small startup sits in a couple different places of a hybrid situation where, yes, I'm the leader of the quality department and quality organization. I also engage with our business facing teams in order to, one, understand if there's any issues that our customers are having. Because if I don't know what issues the customers are having, we can't fix them and we can't resolve things. As I mentioned, I work directly with product managers, and the engineers themselves on delivering whatever body changes that we want to do, features and feature changes. So reviewing, what that means is I'm in there to review feature requests. I'm still writing bugs, writing UI automation at that point in time. And I'm, doing manual testing when needed and when my contractor is behind, if you want to say, or maybe needs a little bit of extra help in that space. But for the most part, we have it pretty well separated out. I take many of the back-end, more technical pieces in that respect. My QA tester, they handle a lot of the front-end changes and we collaborate across. But the one things that we do, like a lot of companies do, is that we are testing and developing in very iterative cycles, and nothing reaches a point within the code base of saying, yes, this is done, tested, reviewed by product until all those pieces are done. And then they go into a pre-staging branch. That's really aided us in making sure that, one, all iterations of testing and possible issues to find have been found early. Then this allowed us to, when we were a bigger team, we were releasing every 2 weeks. And then once we very much shrunk down in size, we really decided that we can't keep old models, because you build old models because you have to deal with people. You build these models of integration pipelines and all this other stuff because you have multiple people, and you have to have additional people in order to help make sure everything flows fast as well. Smaller team, we moved to releasing twice a week. And so now we have pipelines where we release twice a week. We are iteratively developing and completing features and functionalities where, say, in a given week, like today's, a Monday. Today is our close of our, not really sprint, but this is our release freeze day. So whatever is done and tested and that's in our release branch is going to get validated tomorrow, and then that's going to go out tomorrow. Any new changes that have happened between Tuesday and Wednesday will go out Thursday. And so we have this ability now that we release multiple times. We've actually reduced the amount of hot fixes that you have to have. For those that don't know, a hot fix is basically a production issue impacting customers and causing problems for yourself and the customers. And so you have to resolve those. But once you get into a more frequent release cycle, the impact of the issues are drastically reduced. Sometimes, you might have a deploy and say, oh, yeah, look at that. We didn't catch that one. So roll fix. But most times you can go like, okay, this can wait till our next release cycle if it's not overly impactful. So many things happen, but getting to a point of releasing more frequently takes a lot of pre-work where, we've had good engineering champions over the years where pull requests are always of small size in that respect. There's really good product documentation to identify what we are delivering, why we're delivering it. There's good conversations with the engineers and the QA team to say, okay, we're going to implement this. Where's all the threads of impact? And when we flush all of that out beforehand, which sounds very waterfall, but it reduces the amount of churn that happens later. So it gets your upfront planning done, communicate all the changes that you want to do, and constantly iterate as developers are working on certain features and functionalities. And what's turned that into is that we have ideation of like a new feature and function, and it's usually out in a couple weeks, if not sooner. I could probably talk to you about our development lifecycle, which is a bit of a journey from, if you want to say, the textbook piece to what we are now. But we've made some, I would say, good changes in ways in order to make it very clean. So we can actually automate the pieces that were weighing us down.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, it sounds like certainly a move in the right direction in terms of getting to more frequent releases, as you talked about, that'll reduce your hot fixes. And business always benefits from releasing features faster, right? Because usually the features are something that the customer wants and may generate revenue or may generate higher customer satisfaction scores. And so that ultimately helps the business versus waiting for a week or 2 weeks, or some customers wait for a lot more for any kind of releases, right? So really good there. I'm very curious to understand what your guys's SDLC looks like, I guess, from like feature idea to deployment. Like take me through that process of it starting there and then getting to
Okay.
production, and what are you guys doing along the way and what kind of tools you guys are using?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I can dive into that. So we have two product managers, and the way our company is set up, we have two facing customers. We have those individuals that are looking for employment. We consider those job seekers, many job seekers out there in the world these days. And then we have the companies that partner with us in order to promote their roles on our platform. And so product managers are facing both of those directions. Each of them will go through their product discovery of their feature work, really document it out, flush it out in order to understand the problem statement, potential other impacts, what this might bring, and ultimately outline really what they want to produce and why it's going to be beneficial. So they're making their product, documentation product out. That usually takes us into either a full kickoff or at least a pre-kickoff meeting. So we start reviewing this documentation that the product managers have produced. And so we'll get the information before most people read through it, comment out of this document. And so most of that's going to be in Notion. So we're using Notion for managing all that.
How do you like using Notion?
It's good. Notion is like any other software platform. There's mixes of goods and bads, great features and functionalities. I think it's good. There's good integrations with other platforms and products. So, for documentation and longevity of documentation, I think it's good. And as anything, they're constantly improving, tacking in little bits of AI here and there. So after that pre-planning and the meeting, the product managers will usually go back reviewing all of the feedback from engineers, quality managers, and even our director of engineering, or VP of engineering. So all of us are in there because we're a small team. And feedback happens. The product manager will go back and re-massage the information. Then we'll have a kickoff meeting to talk about, okay, here's where we landed with the functionality that we're going to deliver. Engineers will start talking about what pieces. Okay, do we need front end engineering here? We need back end engineering here. A little bit of code exploration if needed. Sometimes we spin off. The developers will spin off and be like, well, this particular area has not been touched or changed in a while. We might refactor it in order to bring it up to date and make it more current. So they'll time box that conversation out in order to make sure that that is brought back and it's understood by the product owner about, hey, here's the timeline. This is in order to give you what you want, we're going to have to do X, Y, and Z. So all those conversations happen up front. The product manager will take all that feedback and start generating JIRA epics and tickets themselves and the stories. So at this point, no code has been written. If anything, maybe a prototype has been, like a UI prototype has maybe been either made by the product manager using a little bit of AI help, or the software engineer themselves and building a prototype in a variety of our different tool sets. So we're a Vue.js company, and so our front end engineer, he can go and prototype something within like a day of giving an idea of how things work using our canned UI tool set. So that usually works out. At that point, the product manager, like today, delivered a epic to us. All the tickets were in there broken out. On the tickets themselves, it was, the standard things that we put in, because we just said, hey, in order for us to understand really what you want out of it, we're going to build this common template with inside JIRA in order for you to say, here is the desire out of the ticket or what we're trying to solve. Here is the acceptance criteria of what basically you're asking the engineer to build and for the QA person to validate. So each ticket is made in that respect and blown out with enough information. We go through and review all those pieces of information, give feedback at that time and point. Then as the engineers maybe free up from other bodies of work, they will start picking up the tickets themselves because the product manager will make the epic, and then the engineers will be like, well, I'm going to do XYZ first, and they start working on them. At the point that they start working on them, each ticket will maybe have sub-tickets, say if a UI components need to be built out or something like that. But each ticket ultimately ends up as a PR. Every single PR goes through a review process. And so a developer will generate a UI prototype if we need some sort of new interaction. We use our standardized product UI components and toolkit in order to do that. At that point, the product manager has an idea of what they want us to build. They've completed their product documentation itself. We will have another meeting in order to do the actual kickoff. And we walk through all the potential deliverables again. After that meeting and feedback, the product manager will start building an epic and all of the JIRA stories themselves. Stories usually are broken down for the components that are going to be delivered. And a lot of times they might actually have a side conversation with the engineer to say, here's this one component, here's all these different pieces that are going to make up this larger body of work. The engineers and quality team will review all those tickets themselves, ask more questions if more clarity is needed. Typically, each ticket has its problem statement, if you want to say, and what's the expected outcome that we're looking for. We've made sure that most of our bodies of work that go into JIRA have a template wrapped around it. So stories have a particular template, so the formatting is always consistent. And same thing with tasks and bugs. It just makes it real easy for everybody to supply information. Then at the point that the developers are ready to get started, they will pick up the tickets for the body for the feature in the order that they deem necessary. So if it's back-end engineering, they're going to build up whatever that they want. As each ticket is completed, the engineers will put up the PR in order for review. And so the way that we do this, we have a particular JIRA Slack channel. We have a particular Slack channel where engineers put their PRs out for review. So we have rules, basically nothing goes into our final, dev branches without being reviewed in some way. And we have our rules around if it's, say, schema changes or something like that, they can be approved by one developer and they can go directly in. Other bodies of work that actually have touch points, like maybe an API or front-end components or front-end UI, that will get developer review and feedback, and then also quality engineering is involved. So after that point, there's certain pieces that we have built, if you want to say just knowledge around to say, these things require dev and QA approval before they can be merged. And so that's where the cycles come in. Usually when QA is involved, the developer has a responsibility after the dev review is done, feedback is handled, they will spin up an ephemeral environment. And so we've built out structures that allows us to create a small containerized environment for us to do our testing on, and this using the sanitized data that I mentioned before. So at that point, the QA person, myself or my contractor, we can dive in, go through the JIRA ticket, go through the feedback. Oh, that's the other thing that we've done. We've also, as I said, we want to make sure that we're communicating fully on our JIRA, on our GitHub pull requests. We have a template there. They say, hey, here's all the pieces of code that I changed. Here's all the sub PRs that are involved. This is ultimately what I'm delivering. And there's also a section for here's test criteria. So our engineers have been, if you want to say, I don't want to say trained. That's a horrible way to put it. We've built up such a good repertoire.
They've been whipped into shape.
In some ways, yes, some ways, no. But a lot of it is the championship of themselves and the team, where they want to know what they're delivering and giving insight to their ideas around how it can be tested. Mostly happy path. Or if the changes are coming in and they might have a trickle down somewhere else, they'll say, hey, make sure all of these other areas are working properly. And so all of this happens in, the life cycle itself of this one JIRA ticket story itself. All the testing happens at this point, and then it will potentially either go into a feature branch or maybe up to our dev branch. And so once all of that is done and everything's been approved by either QA and engineering, it's merged in, next body of work is going. And so this all happens, as I mentioned before, in our 2-week release cycle. We make sure that if anything goes into develop, everybody knows it is going to go out in a day or two. So at that point, there's no rush to get bodies of work out. So if it's something that's going to be a longer development cycle and testing cycle, it'll sit in a feature branch, or we will put it behind a feature flag. So we've built our technology around so we can feature flag certain pieces so they're not turned off, they're benign for the most part, and they're not interrupting anybody. So this allows us to do continuous development, continuous delivery. And at that point, so that
Hey,
ties
Ken,
in.
sorry to interrupt you really quickly. For those that don't know, what is a feature flag and how does that work?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So feature flags are basically the idea of, some people might tie it around A/B testing. You can have feature flags that enable different experiences or different like data processing, perhaps. So one way that we use feature flags is say that we're going to change an experience. We want to keep the existing experience in place, but we have to build all the new features and functionalities, and we'll hide it behind a feature flag that will basically flip between the experiences. So this allows development to keep moving forward, it allows testing to keep moving forward, and internally we can turn these things on and off, do all of our testing. And it also allows us to turn it back off without having multiple environments to do compare and contrast, which is a nice thing. Feature flags can roll into production. That allows us to go and, if you want to say, trial something. So we will put out some new functionality, turn it on, collect analytical data to see what its impact is. If it is negative, we will turn it off. And so that allows feature flagging. The other thing that I mentioned is A/B testing. So A/B testing is considered in a situation where you have multiple experiences, 2 or more. Users will be in certain pools where it could be split 50-50 or maybe 60-40, whatever the desire of the test that you want to have users engage with. Many times it will be user-facing A/B tests, meaning that we're going to give a certain percentage the other older experience, and we're going to give the other percentage the newer experience, and check and monitor the data of what we're trying to achieve out of this test. And so all of those bits and pieces we've custom made. We have them all built in-house. There are companies that offer this features and functionality. Some of them, they can actually meet up to the level of demand from our platform. So that's why we had to go and roll our own. But yeah, that's feature flagging.
Nice.
Great functionality. Yeah.
It is a great functionality. And I'm curious, when you guys are, for example, doing A/B testing or checking whether the new feature that you introduced is valuable or not, what kind of metrics are you all tracking to determine that? And how often is a released feature ends up being hidden because you guys realized that maybe the users didn't like it as much as you guys thought they would?
Yeah. A lot of things we're looking at is measuring certain types of engagement. And so we will feature flags for, say, our, you want to say, our job seeker side of the product of RippleMatch. We'll give an experience for, say, how we're updating our profile generation or profile editing. Somebody might have the older experience and some might get the new one as they're going through it. And we'll measure how much change people are conducting in the space, or maybe the speed of change that people are using that. Other pieces we've done is around our account creation. We've had long flows and we've had very short flows. What engagement happens after that? So most of the time it's about the user experience and what the subsequent actions that we're looking for them to do. In our case, we want people to apply for roles. And if they're able to do that faster, it's more benefit for us. But there definitely have been times when we've rolled out experiments, absolutely tanked, and we're just like, turn that off and go away. The other good thing about feature flags, so many people in software industry will understand there's tons and tons of backend processes that happen and run. You can use feature flags not just for user facing engagement, but also for backend processing. So we've done it where we are building new backend data management, data processing in order to either speed things up or make them more refined. And we've used combination of either A/B testing to filter data through these pipelines, or if you want to really check to see how well things might perform in production because you don't have the infrastructure set up or maybe skills in house to do full performance testing, you can use this feature flags or A/B testing to siphon data, particular ways to be processed and monitor. So feature flags and A/B testing doesn't have to be just forward facing. You can use those internal. And we've done that a good number of times.
Nice. Yeah, that makes sense. At what point are you guys running some automated tests, and what types of automated tests do you guys have in place?
Yeah. So this kind of goes back to as the developers are putting up their PRs. So we have backend Python PyTests across all of our backend. So all of our
Because your backend
components
is in
there.
Python.
Yeah, all the
Okay.
backends in Python. So PyTest is running in our CI/CD. Our front end is all Vue.js. And so most of our individual, as I said, we have a UI toolkit. We have UI tests for those components and other functionality. So those have front-end tests. So all of that runs in our CI/CD pipeline against every single branch that is pushed up to GitHub. The other side of it is what I maintain. I maintain our UI automation. And so the journey that we've had there is when I was going through the hiring, I hired a QA engineer that started building out the conceptual idea that I had around using Python and Selenium in order to drive this. Reason why we kept it within that tool space is before myself joining, there was actually already UI automation written by the engineers at that time. It was using Python, PyTest, and Selenium. So keeping things close to home. So one, as my QA engineer starts adopting our engineering practices, it's not foreign to the engineers when they do code reviews. And so that's a key thing. Every piece of code, whoever's writing it, software engineer, quality engineer, gets a code review. There's no hidden code going into our GitHub repository. So there's always review and there's standards around what we deliver. And so that helped my QA engineer level up their development of what they're delivering because they had to basically leverage our backend style guide in order to deliver the UI automation that they're writing. And so I've inherited that and I've started getting deeper into Python and PyTest, which was new to me in this space. Previous company I worked at, I was using WebDriver IO and JavaScript, which underlying technology is Selenium. Selenium as underlying driver for UI engagement within a browser is all the same. Tool set on top is just different. Right now, our UI automation is mostly run from myself as I'm re-architecting it. So our product has changed dramatically in lots of different spaces. The UI automation wasn't able to keep up at the time. As I said, we've had headcount changes. So I've taken on that responsibility. And so I've been working through different components of that and re-architecting how our UI automation works. At the time before we introduced a situation where, we had more automation running and our UI automation would run anytime an ephemeral environment was stood up. And the idea of PR has been approved by a developer, so dev review is complete. A test environment is started. A secondary GitHub job or GitHub action would kick off and it would run our UI tests. And so we had circular information that would kick off the UI tests. UI tests would run through its cycles. All results would end up back on the PR. And so at that point, we have good feedback loops of, without having to necessarily go jump and grab an engineer and tell them, hey, in Slack, what's going on? So all the information came back. One, the QA team or individual that was testing that PR could look at it and say, oh, these areas are failing. Or the engineer could look at it and say, oh, these areas are failing. Other things that UI automation helped is when we did a massive rewrite of some of our functionality. It was a very legacy at the time. Engineers rewrote how the engagements of all the different layers were working. UI automation drove through that feature and functionality and just uncovered tons and tons and tons of issues before it even got to, the QA team itself or the manual testers. That's where we've been and where we're going to get back to. And so at this point, my journey is I've gotten most of the back of the house automation almost rewritten in order for that. And then my next side is to rewrite the job seeker side. And so that's mostly what anybody listening to this podcast will hear and see if they go sign up an account with our company.
Cool. All right. Beautiful. Thanks for explaining that. I think one other topic that we mentioned that you're interested in talking about is helping like engineers and esthets level up and the importance of it. Talk to us a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways to approach this. One of the things that always drives me is with my hires or even my coworkers that I engage with is I'm always trying to make sure that they have more, I would say more cards in their hand than if they decide to depart and leave to another company than what they showed up with. And so leveling up is one of those things where I'm always looking for opportunities for those that I directly have career responsibility for in order to help them engage with our products and platforms or the engineers in a different way in order to make their jobs ultimately easier. So leveling up is one of those things where I look at it. It's not necessarily, it is about skill. It is about knowledge. It's also applying both and finding different avenues for somebody to do that. In our world of quality professionals, there's different directions or possibilities people want to go. A lot of people think that they ideally want to become a quality engineer or maybe an SDET. there's a journey in there. There's no shortcuts. There's a lot of learning that you have to do. You have to have an opportunity and a drive to do it. And so if those desires are communicated to your manager, whomever that person is, ideally they will help you get there. And so, but even if you are a QA tester and a manual QA, there's many different things that you can do in order to aid yourself in the work that you are ultimately delivering and communicating to your developers and product managers. And learning your tooling is good, or learning the tooling that the developers are using. As those are doing manual testing, there's many different sets of tools developers use and other QAs use. And so finding the right tooling is good. Leveraging it is better, is even easier or better, I would say. In the situation where, say, you're testing a UI that's in a browser. Yes, everybody says, hey, open the dev tools and explain and show me what's in the dev tools. If you don't really know what you're looking at or looking for, there's opportunities for you to learn and level up. And so in that web browser, in those dev tools, there's many different things going on. You can see the generated source of the HTML and JavaScript that's in there. You can see the network communications that are in there. You can see what's happening on the JavaScript layer itself, and maybe errors are thrown in the console. Getting enough drive to understand why those are happening, or pulling out the additional information, aids you in knowing how features and functions work, how to communicate to the development team. So if, as an example, you're testing this web application, a page is not loading correctly, and just going and say, hey, this isn't loading, doesn't lead down to a good positive path. But if you take the information that you collect and say, all right, here's this network tab, I see this call to whatever endpoint is throwing this error. Many times there's an error in the payload that you can reference and use. Having the knowledge to take that information to somebody and gives them an opportunity to, one, get to the potential solution faster, and two, you also have gained more knowledge about where data comes from and why it and how it gets into the browser and how it gets into the UI. And I think that's, good pieces of information. Knowing where to find information is key. The other big thing that I really like to, and I make sure that my team does, and unfortunately it doesn't happen with every organization, is understand, as I mentioned, understand how and what data is used to drive your application. Couple things I always make sure that my team do generally and regularly is access to the database. I know many companies, depending on their processes and protocols, they don't allow it. But in a test environment, why would you not have access to it? That's my key thing. So if you have access to the data and you see where the calls are coming from, it opens up many different opportunities for you to test faster. And so those pieces of engagement are really important. So I make sure that my QAs, if they don't know how to write a simple SQL query or building tool, I make sure that they can do it. Or I will provide them, say, here's a base structure of a SQL query to get this data. Because ultimately my goal for them is to use this knowledge to aid in informing the developers of what else you're looking for. And you're not just looking at the UI, you're looking at the data, because data is king. If the data is not getting in there, or the data is returning, but the UI is not rendering it, there's a misstep. And it helps in that communication of saying the page isn't loading. Well, why? Well, the data is here. I can see it in the network browser. I can see it in the network tab. There's this, something else is happening. And so then one, who to possibly go talk to, if there's multiple entities involved in testing this. So leveling up is about doing that, driving that curiosity to provide more information, ask the questions, or answer your own questions about what it is or what it does. And continuously doing that, you will start to change how your conversations go with the engineers and the product managers. The other side of it is, as you get this more knowledge about your environment that you're testing, as you are talking about new features and functionalities, you can have an in-depth statements around, well, if we change this, I know that it's going to affect whatever else that's maybe not user facing, but it might be a back-end process. And so leveling up is gaining knowledge and using it. That's where all this is really going.
Yeah, really great points. I feel like especially in technology, we always have to level up because technology moves so rapidly. And I mean, I guess you don't have to if you don't want to do it, but that's how I think it is easier for you to get replaced by either tools or other engineers, is when organizations do see that you've been stagnating, and during hard times, they might see like, hey, this person hasn't made a lot of progress. So who do we let go? We'll let this person go because they just continue be where they have been for the past many years versus someone that's been
Sometimes.
growing and becoming a very integral part of the team because they are understanding the ins and outs of everything that's going on in the application. Those are the types of people that are very valuable to the organization.
Yeah, that's very well stated.
Yeah, thank you. Well, Ken, it's been
Yeah.
such a pleasure chatting with you. Appreciate your time, your wisdom. Thank you for coming on the show and sharing with us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I totally enjoyed myself.
I was super happy to hear it. Have a beautiful day.
All right. Thank you.